My name is MacArthur Inka Odet, a student of Ghana Christian International High School. I'm in year 11, and I'd like you to watch and subscribe to the WASSCE History TV channel for more educative and history lessons.
Hi there. I welcome you to today's virtual lessons. And before we begin, I would urge you to subscribe to the channel and also recommend it to your friends as well. Now, today I want us to look at a very interesting topic in history, and that is going to be the concept of history in general. Okay, the concept of history in general, and that is what our topic is going to be on today. The concept of history in general, and basically we will look at the meaning of history, in general. So let's go and find out our lesson objectives. So our lesson objectives for today will be that by the end of this lesson, you should be able to explain the concept of history. So if you are asked about the concept of history, you should be able to do that by the end of this discussion. So let's go in there and look at what we mean by the concept of history. So what is history? If you are asked to talk about history, what do you say history is? So let's begin with that. Again, we should also be able to differentiate between a bad history and a good history. And so what makes a bad history and what also makes a good history? We should be able to differentiate between that by the end of this lesson. Good. So let's begin with our lessons for today. So let's look at this. The term history was actually derived from a Greek word which is called historia. All right, and historia is a Greek word, and in English it means enquiry. Right, so historia means what? Enquiry in English. And history began to be studied as a subject, during the 5th century as a result of man's effort to understand and explain human, past in a more rational way. And so it was Herodotus who actually first laid down the foundation for historical studies, and therefore he is termed as the father of history. The father of history, not because he was the first man he was the person who brought history into the world, but he was the person who laid the foundation for historical studies, whereby history began to be written down. It was Herodotus who first started that, and that is why he is termed as the father of history. Not because he was the one who brought history to the world, but the man who actually wrote down history, began to write down history. And that's what we mean by him being the father of history. Good. So let's move on to the next one. History is also a living subject which reveals the past, gives an understanding of the present, and gives an indication into the future. In order to understand the past, you need to go into in order to understand the present, for the present, you need to go into the past. In order to understand the past, it gives you understanding of the present, and then you can base on the present to make further decisions and indications. And that is why if you go to a hospital, you realize that a doctor, when you go and complain of a stomach ache or a headache, you realize that the doctor would ask you, what did you eat yesterday? What happened to you yesterday? What went into your stomach yesterday? The doctor wants to find out so that he can understand your present situation. All right? So in order for him to understand your present situation, he needs to know your past, what you did to your stomach. And then if he knows that, then he can, based on your past, prescribe what to do in future. And that is why it is important for everyone to learn the subject. Good. So let's then comes to here. African studies then therefore will deal with the study of the significant past of the African people. So significant past over the significant past. It is not everything in history that we learn. Some people are quick to say that history deals with only learning about the past. Yes, we learn about the past, but it is not everything in the past that we learn. We learn about significant what past, event in the past which has had effect on people. That is what history studies. History does not study any past. I mean, for instance, if somebody dies today, it's only the family member who will remember the death of that person. Even in some instances, they don't even remember the, in some families. If you die, you are not even an important person. Sometimes they don't even remember you. You understand? So somebody can die today, and then he is remembered all throughout, generations. Mandela will be remembered all throughout generations. Kwame Nkrumah of Ghana will be remembered all throughout generations because their death has had an impact on a society. And that is what we mean by significant impact. Not just, anything that happens in the past, we say it is history. No. So history deals with what? Significant past. And so you should bear that in mind, that we don't study anything, and African history probably deals with that. History is also the picture we can make of all of our ancestors and what happened to them and how they lived their life. Sometimes we want to just, say a whole lot about our ancestors. They were not civilized, they were not this, they were not that, and all of that. History is the only subject that will reveal how our ancestors, lived their life. It's the picture that we get. No, it is the subject that can only explain people's past, about how they behaved, what they did, and of course what they did different, why they failed in certain ways, and why they also, succeeded in other ways. Why they had wars, why they had, of course, miseries, why some had peace and some had, of course, war, happiness. So it is necessary to understand these things in the past if we are to have a proper understanding of what? Of the future or of the present. And that is what history seeks to do. For anybody to understand the present, you need to understand the past. And so for any country to understand its present situation, that country needs to go into the past of that country, go into the history of that country, so that that country can be able to know his what? Past, and then understand his present, and then take up decisions that can actually and really, help the country. Because until that is done, the country will keep on repeating the same mistakes over and over again. And this, I don't leave my country out. Ghana is a very, very good example for that. We have failed as a country to learn our past. And so our politicians, our lawmakers, keeps on making the same very, very mistakes all the time. Because we have failed to go into the past. We keep on repeating the same mistakes, the same policies that never worked out. And that is something worrying. Very, very worrying. Worrying situation. So I will entreat our leaders to go into our past and find out what really happened, what people did and they didn't do it well. And that is the only way we can survive as a country. If not, we will keep on making the same mistakes, which will not help us. All right? And so that is what we mean by, of course, history. Let's continue with that. So let's look at the whole phenomenon. Let's go on. Now, so let's then comes down to African history. What then is African history about? Now, African history is the study of past institutions and cultures, of the African people or people who lived in Africa. So in African history that you will be studying, as a senior high or high school student, you will learn about the economic, the political, and the social activities of the people who lived in Africa. And until we understand these social, these economic, or these developments, or these aspects of the people's life, we can never ever understand our present situation now. So in African history, we learn about the past institutions and cultures of Africa. And that is something that every African is supposed to do, because our lifestyle, our way of life, our culture, our institutions have been, we we've had so much influence from Europe in our culture, in our institution. And therefore, it is important that we study our own selves. We have studied so much about Europe that we don't even know our own selves. So it is important that Africans study their own selves so that they can understand themselves and make decisions that will favor themselves. There is a bad history and a good history. And that's one thing that we should also know. It is not all history which are good. We have bad and what? And good history. And let's look at the bad or good history. Sorry. Before that, let's go back. I think I forgot to show you a picture of Herodotus. Yes, this is the picture of, of course, Herodotus. So you can see, of course, Herodotus there. Yes, you can see, of course, Herodotus there. This is a picture of Herodotus. Good. Now that we are good with that, let's continue with what we were talking about. So we have bad and what? And good history. We have bad and what? And good, of course, history. I'm sorry about that. What then do we mean by bad history or good history? Now, a bad history appears when a historian allows their personal prejudice or their personal feelings to get a better of them. Okay, and so of course, for instance, you have the notion that Africans are barbaric people, and you have this notion and you want to learn about the religious life of the African people. If you do not do away with this personal feeling of yours, you will be tempted to add in your report that Africans are indeed barbaric because of the things you hear, because you are letting your personal feelings have a better of you. So it is important that Africans, we do, of course, do away with prejudice. I mean, for instance, if a political party in power, if a position is writing the history of a certain political party in power, you realize that because that opposition party does not belong to the political party in power, what they do is that every good thing that political party in power does, they rubbish it, and most often they write all evil things about that party in power. And that is a bad history. And we have some of these histories, so many in our books, in our history books. There are so many books, for instance, written about Nkrumah that you sit down and you just don't understand. Only to find out that these books were written by the UGCC or some other party, some other opposition parties who were not in agreement with whatever Nkrumah did. And so if you pick such a book and read, you become confused. All right? However, a good history is the opposite of what? A bad history. Now, you see, many of the imperialists of Europeans who came here in Africa wrote bad history about us because of their preconceived ideas that Africans were not, Africans were barbaric people, Africans were pagans, Africans were heathens, Africans had no religion, Africans had no history. And so that kind of idea influenced their writings. And so you realize that they never wrote anything good about Africa. And that is what we term bad history. So if you are a fan of reading books written by European explorers and European historians, you see Africa represented in a very demeaning and bad ways, which we should condemn. So we should all be in good position to write good history so that our people can actually enjoy. Good. I think we have done this. We have done well. Thank you very much for your time, and I hope that we continue some other time. Have a nice day and enjoy yourself. Bye-bye.
WASSCE History TV.